Sup, Dad?
Welcome to This Dad Reads, a bookish podcast spanning genres and fandoms. I'm your host, Jason, and on today's episode, we're catching up on my current reads and chatting with Star Wars author George Mann. What is going on, my fandom friends? I hope everyone is doing well out there. On a personal note, I have recently started a new full-time job, so that has been just kind of taking up all of my mental space, but that does not mean that I have not still created space and time for books and reading, and so I'm excited to be here with another episode, and really excited because I am joined by another Star Wars author, George Mann. He and I were able to chat recently and talked a lot about just kind of the variety of books and publications that he writes in Star Wars, some of his stuff he does outside of Star Wars, and to my surprise and delight, our mutual love of tabletop games. So that is coming up a little bit later. But before we do that, I want to jump into my last current next. So the last book I read was Dark Age by Pierce Brown, the final book of my Red Rising reread journey in the lead up to Lightbringer, which is coming out July 25th. This was my first time reading Dark Age, and it was as brutal and as heartbreaking as I remember. This book is aptly named. It is dark and bleak, and I will not say any spoilers because I know there's still a lot of people who have not jumped into this saga, and again, I will continue to bang the Red Rising drum. If you have not read Red Rising yet, please do so. It is amazing. All of my Star Wars friends out there, I know that there's always a lot on our plates, catching up on books, keeping up with comics, but if you ever have a spare moment and need something else to do, or you need a little Star Wars break, the Red Rising saga, it's amazing. So Dark Age is book 5. I finished my reread of that, gave myself 2 whole weeks, which is, like I said before, not the norm for me. But it's a long book. It's like 700 something pages. So I'm really glad that I gave myself more time to do that. It was really good. It was crazy. I know a lot of people in the Red Rising community like to rank the books in order of what they like, so I thought I would do that now since I've finished the 5 that are currently published. So my number 1 book in the Red Rising series is Morning Star. That was my favorite book when I read it, and it continues to be my favorite out of all 5 of them so far. My second favorite is Iron Gold. I really liked the POV switch up, and I've read that one the most out of all of them. I've read that book 3 times, and after the 3rd time, I really just... my love for it was solidified. It's one of my favorites. And hear me say, just because these are ranked, that does not mean that in any of these books I think are lower than another or less quality. It's purely just kind of my own enjoyment factor. So my 3rd favorite is Red Rising, the first book. I think that holds just a special place in my heart. It's the beginning of the saga. It will definitely pull you in. I was drawn in immediately, and that just has like a special place in my heart. My 4th is Dark Age, and my 5th is Golden Sun. So that actually is a great segue into my current read. The current book I am reading is Lightbringer, the 6th book in the Red Rising saga. It is coming out, like I said, July 25th. I was stoked to be able to get an early release copy, and I am almost halfway done with that right now, so it remains to be seen where Lightbringer will fall in my overall ranking of Red Rising books, but if the book continues to be what it is, it will be very up there. It definitely has a shot at the number 1 spot. It's hovering around number 2 right now. Obviously no spoilers, and I can't even say anything. There's embargoes and everything like that, but I am enjoying it a lot. It is par for the course in terms of just epic Pierce Brown writing, character development, emotions, heart. I honestly don't want to put it down. I gave myself 2 weeks to read this book as well, but I think I'm going to finish it faster because it's one of those books, and you readers out there, you know that feeling when you don't want to do anything else but read that book and engage with those characters. That's where it's at with Lightbringer for me right now. So stoked to finish that, and I will have my review written and ready for when the book gets published in a couple months. The next book I am reading, jumping back into Star Wars, once again, I recently received the next Star Wars book that's coming out July 18th. It is Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade by Delilah Dawson. Now, I'm a huge fan of Delilah Dawson's writing. Her Star Wars books are some of my favorite in the new canon. Phasma is really fun and cool and blew me out of the water and really surprised me with how much I loved that book. I was able to chat with her at Star Wars Celebration and told her as much. I think Phasma would make an awesome limited Disney Plus series. It's so good. So I'm a huge fan of her style and of her writing, so I cannot wait to dive into that book. I don't know a lot about it. Obviously, it's about an Inquisitor, but like I said, I've taken a tiny Star Wars break. There has been a little bit of a gap in between publications, which is totally fine with me, but I'm excited to read Rise of the Red Blade and share my thoughts with all of you guys in the very near future. KC78, are you as excited as I am about my next guest? I figured as much. He is a Star Wars author who has written everything from comic books to novels, and he has a number of books in the lineup of Phase 3 of the High Republic starting off this fall. It is none other than George Mann joining me today on This Dad Reads. Welcome to the show, George.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Definitely. So glad to have another Star Wars author here on the show. It's always a good time.
Always fun to be here and chat.
Definitely. I'm excited to just talk all things, Star Wars and get to know you a little bit more.
Sure, yeah. I mean, who doesn't like talking about Star Wars at the end of the day with a cup of tea?
Exactly. So to start off, can you just tell me a little bit about the story of you being just exposed to and loving the Star Wars franchise? What's your history on that?
Yeah, so I think I was quite young, but I think my first kind of interaction with Star Wars was with Empire Strikes Back at the theatres, the movie theatres. My granddad used to take me to see lots of films, and I remember watching The Dark Crystal with him, Search for Spock. Those two stick very clearly in my memory, but so does Empire Strikes Back. So I kind of been kind of more than 4 or 5, and the thing that really jumped out at me was, apart from the spectacle of it all, the big spaceships and Darth Vader, was R2-D2. I became obsessed with R2-D2, and it started kind of a love affair with Star Wars that has lasted obviously into kind of my entire life. And from there, it became kind of like getting the comic books. We used to get UK. I imagine Cavan's been on here and waxed lyrical about this, but we used to get Marvel UK used to reprint the comic books from the original Marvel US editions, so we would get them over here at a time when we weren't getting a lot of Marvel comics. We were kind of getting just reprints. We didn't get imports, but that was kind of a way of continuing Star Wars for me before I ever discovered the novels. Actually, it was comics, but the action figures as well. I just accumulated loads of the action figures. Used to play around the back of the sofa with my cousin, making up stories, having a whale of a time. I had the full Ewok village and the Rancor. I wish I still had them. They've all gone now. But yeah, so kind of, and then the sticker books as well. That's something I remember bonding with my dad over the I don't know. Do you get these sticker books in the States, like Panini or Merlin, where you football stickers, I guess. We had Star Wars ones, and I remember me and my dad really got into collecting the Star Wars ones. Probably for Return of the Jedi, if I work out the timings. Mm-hmm. But I remember him coming home with an entire box of a sticker, and spending the whole evening trying to fill in all the gaps in the sticker book. So that was very cool. It was a massive part of my childhood, Star Wars, and that's kind of how I got into it. But we were talking a little bit about families and things before we came on air, and one of the great things about it is I've then been able to go through that same process with my own kids and share it with particularly my eldest, James. So we can probably touch on that a bit later.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to mention those sticker books. That is a very core memory of my childhood as well. Like, not necessarily Star Wars, but like Disney or like every movie that would come out. I
Yeah.
remember my cousin too. Like every time his mom would go to the store, she'd get just like a new pack. And I remember you could mail. I never was able to complete a book. Like that was always like there. You would start so. We would like start so big and then it would just kind of like fade away after a while. And I know you could like, I remember being able to mail away to like say the ones you needed, but we just never got to that point. So did you ever finish a whole book?
I did with the Return of the Jedi one.
With it? Okay.
It was the same thing. It was like exactly what you said. I think you could send away for like the last 12. You couldn't go any more than that. So
okay.
I think we got to the point where we kind of needed those, and we did complete the book. But
do you still have
probably
those?
the only one I've ever completed.
Okay.
I don't have it, I'm afraid, anymore. No.
Oh my gosh.
No, most of my childhood stuff like that's long gone, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. That's so funny. I don't know if you guys have, well, I mean, there's like dollar stores here, but there's a dollar store here where I was recently there and they still make them. Those sticker books still exist. And I didn't know they were still made. I thought that was just like a relic of the 90s or the 80s, but they still exist. And so I was trying to, it's one of those things like I was trying to tell my kids like, oh my gosh, look, like, and they were just like, we don't know what this is. Like, what is this? So it was funny. I love that. And that kind of speaks to that collector, like the thrill of the hunt, right? Like trying to like always wanting to buy a pack. And
I have the completist gene, unfortunately. So it's like this is if I start collecting something, I kind of go all in. So I have to be really careful about like what am I going to collect and what am I not going to collect. It's just like a little thing that's like a switch that goes on my head. It's like, right now, Star Wars books, for example, it's like I'm trying to get all the canon Star Wars novels in hardcover. I don't have them all. Some of them in softcover, and it's like some of them are quite hard to come across these days.
They are. You and my cousin are very similar in that regard. Same thing. Like if once the trigger gets switched, it's like eBay, anything, any means necessary to like find the thing.
Yeah. It's a dangerous path.
It really is. It really is. We'll talk. I think we're both tabletop game fans. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But you mentioned kids. Like I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and a lot of my Star Wars history is steeped in nostalgia as well. And what I really struggle with is trying to like impart like my. I know that there's things that they'll enjoy, but it's so hard as a parent to like, you want to introduce them to something, but let them find their own path. So what did that kind of journey look like to you as a father, throughout the generations? I know you're in a different, kind of stage of life with your kids, but what did that look like, I guess, when they were little, and how does that look now when they're like older?
Yeah, so with I'll take my eldest first because he's the biggest Star Wars fan of the two. So I have James, who's 19, and Elliot, who's 14. James, it's all about the prequel era, and he wasn't around. I mean, he was born in 2003, so he missed the kind of the theater versions of the movies. But it was Clone Wars that got him into it, because I think he'd found it himself actually, and he'd come to Clone Wars. I think he'd just been watching. I don't know whether it was on one of the TV networks over here. He'd seen some episodes, and I'm trying. He must have been like 7, 8, something like that. And he was like, "What's this, Dad?" And I was like, "What's this? This is Star Wars. let's talk Star Wars." So I introduced him to he wanted to watch some movies, but we did watch the original movies, but we also watched the prequel movies, and he really wanted to watch the prequel movies because it had the characters he'd been seeing on the screen with Obi-Wan and Anakin, and for him, they were the ones who really he got sucked into the prequel era. So Star Wars toys started to appear, Star Wars kids books, and we watched the entirety of the Clone Wars together, which was a brilliant experience. Just like every day, let's watch an episode before bedtime. We burned our way through all of those, and then through Rebels when Rebels landed, and that's continued to like Mandalorian. Like he went through a little phase where he kind of kind of went, right, I think I'm probably done with Star Wars now. He's like, I suppose he's reached that age. He's like, I've discovered beer and girls. Um, and, um, and then he went away to university, and then he came back and was like, you know what? I really want to watch Andor and Obi-Wan, and I was like, great, let's do it. Let's do it while you're on your break from uni. So we went back into that routine. Let's just watch an episode a day, and he was straight back into it. So and in a different way, because he's now got a young adult's perspective on things. So it's a different discussion. It's not about like how cool is that lightsaber. Look at how that character's just beating the bad guys. It becomes much more of like the sort of conversation that maybe you and I would have, or me and one of my mates would have. About the subtext and the politics, and that was one of the great things about Andor. He was like really getting under the hood of like, well, what does it mean to be a rebel, and really interesting for a young man of 19, 20 who's taking his first steps into an interest in politics, to be able to kind of see Star Wars through that lens, and for me to be able to kind of watch that and talk to him about that. It's been fascinating. My youngest, Elliot, hasn't embraced Star Wars in quite the same way. He's interested. He kind of knows what's going on. He knows who all the characters are. And actually, the way that he's come into it more than anything is through reading the stuff that I'm writing, which has been great because, with Quest for the Hidden City, it was a middle grade novel, written a couple of years ago now, and he was a bit younger, so he was, just at the top end of the target audience. I was like, will you read this for me and give me, because he's a big reader, will you read this for me and give me some feedback, before I send it in? And he was like, yeah, great. So that was how he kind of got more into Star Wars, because he's been reading things and giving me feedback, which is, a lovely thing to be able to share.
That's awesome. He was your beta reader.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
That's amazing. You don't even have to pay him, right?
No, yeah. Well, you say that, but
there's always a cost.
There's always a cost.
That's awesome. Well, you mentioned it a little bit, and this kind of leads into my next question. And what was your journey to being a published author in the Star Wars universe? I know that maybe you can kind of go back into your professional history and like kind of what led you to being an author and then kind of getting into the Star Wars world.
Sure, yeah. So I think it's scary to say that I've been a professional writer now for 23 years. But I've always wanted to write, always. And when I was a kid, I didn't really know that I wanted to be like a novelist or, comic book writer or anything like that. But I knew I wanted to tell stories and be surrounded by books. And so I wrote a lot as a kid. I used to make like little picture books, folded together piece of paper with little drawings about some of my favorite characters and stuff, early fanfic, like we all do. I think so we do in the UK, we tend to, like at the age of about 14, we do like school work placement for 2 weeks. So you can get a little taste of like the working life. And I managed to get a work placement in a bookstore, mainly because it was like, I might get a discount on buying some books. And it worked. But what happened is at the end of that process, they were like, I spent 2 weeks just putting stock out on, but I knew about books, and I think that must have come across because they offered me a weekend job. So I took it, and then started working in this bookstore, and being surrounded by books. And then I did that all through college. And then kind of started doing it full time. Was writing at the same time as that, made some kind of little inroads into getting some small press, some science fiction stories published, drawing on a lot of kind of all the things I love, as well as Star Wars, like Hammer Horror, Doctor Who, kind of Sherlock Holmes, lots of kind of key influences. And from there I managed to get a job in publishing, so I kind of went from working in bookstores to working for a publisher with Black Library and the Warhammer novels. So I spent a long time working in that team, and then eventually running that team and running that business and seeing how publishing worked from the other side. But all the while I was still writing. And I kind of reached a point in about 2015 where my writing career was growing and growing, and I was I was turning away writing opportunities because I had a full-time job, and I had a brilliant conversation with a friend and with my wife, and kind of like, what am I doing? This is the dream. This is the dream. I've got to chase the dream. And I'd spent 15 years as a published writer, not pursuing it full time. And at this point, I kind of like, if I'm ever going to give it a try, it's now, because I'm, the work's there. And I just had a very successful Doctor Who novel, and I was writing my own original fiction as well. So I did it. I took the plunge, and it was kind of around that time, 2015, 2016. Me and my friend Cavan Scott, who I'm sure you know and have had on the show before, I decided we were going to start trying to break into comic writing as well, because me and Cav have been friends for a long time, and decided to go to San Diego Comic-Con. And Cav was already writing the Wild Space books for Star Wars through a UK publisher. So he'd got to know Mike Siglain a little bit, and we'd gone out there, and we didn't really know that many people, but we were starting to kind of make inroads, talk to publishers, and we ended up having a few drinks with Mike Siglain one night in the hotel bar. Just a very casual, not a work related thing, just a social drink. Bonding over all those shared things I talked about before, Hammer Horror and Sherlock Holmes, and realizing we had a lot in common in our interests. And around that time, I think it must have been 2017 actually, I had a book called Witchwood that I'd just written, which is an original novel. It's kind of a crime mystery novel, but with a supernatural element to it, and it's got this kind of fictional folklore running through it. We kind of, me and Mike exchanged Twitter, followed him, he followed me, kind of left it at that. Then a few months later, I was going to New York Comic Con, and I got a message from Mike Siglain saying, "Oh, can you come out for a drink?" And I still thought, oh, it's going to be another nice social night out. And it was, but at one point he kind of pulled me to one side and he said, I bought your book, Witchwood. I saw it through Twitter and I bought it, and I really enjoyed it. And I want to ask you a question. He said, did all that folklore in the book, did you make it up, or was that based on kind of historical stuff? And I said, oh no, I made it all up. And he went, oh great. Do you want to do the same for Star Wars? I said, yes,
Whoa.
Please. Yes, please. I nearly dropped my drink. And that's where Myths and Fables had come from. So he'd read Witchwood, and he'd had this idea of kind of doing a book with fictional kind of folklore type stories, bedtime stories, Grimm's fairy tale type stories in it, and kind of put me and the book together. And that was the kind of the beginning of my kind of Star Wars writing career. So I, thanks to Mike for that. And also, I'm so pleased he read Witchwood, because that's what led to it all.
Yeah.
And we had so much fun writing those Myths and Fables books, that and Dark Legends.
Yes.
And the reason Dark Legends exists is because I kind of had to come up with story pitches for Myths and Fables, and I just wrote too many. I think I went in with like 25 story ideas for a book that needed 10, and like quite a lot of them were quite dark. And, at the end of the first meeting, Mike said, this is great. We're going to do a Halloween book. Keep these ideas for the Halloween book. And that's how that happened.
That's awesome.
So very cool.
So what I hear you saying is, if you want to get into the Star Wars publishing world, you need to get Mike Siglain drunk.
I wouldn't say that at all.
Oh man, that's awesome though. I mean, that's like the epic amount of payoff for like something. A lot of Star Wars fans out there do stuff as a side hustle, and they're just doing stuff for fun. And obviously, there was tons of work that went into that, and like focusing on a hobby as like something that you're passionate about and doing on the side, and then taking that leap. That's an amazing, like, inspirational story to hear. That's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think the genuine answer to the kind of how to get into Star Wars is actually to go and write your own stuff first, because Star Wars is an invite thing, and what actually happens is the editorial team on Star Wars are very keenly aware of what else is going on in the market, who's writing what, because they want to match up authors and invite them in if they find an author who they think will be a good fit, particularly with either with a particular project in mind or a particular story thread in mind. So so that's what I actually genuinely say to people who say, how do I get into Star Wars writing? It's like, put stuff out there.
Yeah.
Write. Show the world that you've got stories to tell, original stories to tell. And it's kind of like a weird loop. It's like you can be massively inspired by Star Wars, go and do something original, and that leads back to Star Wars. It's a very cool way.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you mentioned it a little bit. You mentioned part of your career involved being in the Warhammer world, and like you said before we were on air, we were talking about our mutual love for tabletop games. So, talk to me a little bit about that. Like, what are some of your favorite games to play, and how does that kind of inspire what you do on the writing side?
So I tend to play I don't play as much as I used to, particularly because my 19-year-old James is away at university and he's like my gaming buddy. But we love like little skirmish miniatures games. There's a fantastic little game called Rangers of Shadow Deep, which is like a miniatures agnostic game where you put together this little band of rangers, and it's co-op. So like it's you and whoever else you're playing with against the game. So you've got wandering monsters and missions and stuff, and you just need a little 3x3 gaming table, kitchen table, some scenery, and you go and play these missions, and you kind of level up your rangers as you go through it. It's a game I absolutely love. Another game I play very regularly is a Fantasy Flight game called Arkham Horror, the card game. Absolutely love that game. It's so cool. It's such a great, like, you build a deck, and you go on an investigation, and there's like a series of missions. You can do a campaign over like 10 investigations, and it's like one big linking story, and your character goes through, assuming they don't die. So I've got a couple of friends who I regularly get together with and play that stuff. But the other thing that I do is I collect role-playing games, and I don't often get a chance to play. I used to play a lot when I was a kid. I don't often get a chance to play these days. But I love immersing myself in the worlds that have been created and reading the books. That's one of the. It's similar to the way I love Star Wars. Actually, it's like the D&D, the Forgotten Realms and D&D. There's so much cool material and so many cool stories to delve into. I love kind of opening up those gazetteers and looking at the maps and different, non-player characters that people have come up with, and kind of the stories that weave through decades of storytelling. There aren't that many, when you really actually look at it, there aren't that many kind of universes out there that have that breadth and depth of like that going back to the 70s to the present day. Star Wars is one of those universes. It's like everyone who writes contributes to that world, and it builds and builds and builds and builds. D&D is very similar. A couple of those core settings in D&D are the same. So I suppose it gives me a similar thrill to kind of to fall into those worlds. And one of the things that's nice about the D&D side of it is I don't write in those worlds, so it's just a fan thing. It's to explore. Star Wars I absolutely adore, obviously. But it is also like sometimes I have to sit and read stuff for work to do actual research that I'm going to put into a story, or you have a tough day working on a book and you're like, oh, right. And actually, on those days, the last thing you want to do is go, all right, now I'm going to go and relax with some more Star Wars. It's like, and those days, don't get me wrong, they don't happen very often because, I'm very, very honored. It's like, it's a dream job, and I'm not going to pretend it's not, but it still works sometimes, So D&D is a bit of escapism. So that's awesome. That, and I'm trying to think what else. I've got a lot of Warhammer stuff. I used to obviously work for Games Workshop, so I mentioned earlier. So I've got a whole kind of attic full of Games Workshop models. Some of them, I've got like the grey boxes of shame, which are like sprues that'll never get turned into anything. But I'm very keen to lay my hands on a copy of Star Wars Shatterpoint, because that's the sort of like little miniatures game that I like, where you don't have to have a whole army. You just put together a little band of characters.
Sure.
And you can go for it. and have a kind of game over a couple of hours. So
Love it.
so that's going to be a purchase very soon when it comes out.
That's awesome. Well, George, next time you're in California, I would love to invite you out for a game night at my house. I often have my brother-in-law, my cousin, like we are game people. So I've been loving the Star Wars deck building game from Fantasy Flight. It's really 1-to-1, so maybe that could just be like 2 of us. But then I know that Star Wars Unlimited just got announced, the new like collectible card game, which they know what they're doing with that one. Like collectors, I'm nervous, like very nervous. Oh man,
I was all in on Destiny, Star Wars Destiny.
Yes,
same. And I've still got all my decks that I built.
Me too.
But it's funny how when I used to love playing that game, but it's funny for me how when a game stops, a game like that, a TCG, so like I kind of lose momentum in wanting to play it as well.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I enjoy about it is like, oh look, there's some new cards. How are they going to change the game?
Yes.
So you kind of sat there. So I'm really keen to see what they're going to do with Star Wars Unlimited and how that works.
Same thing with the Lorcana from Disney coming up. My perspective as a tabletop game fan has definitely changed as I've become, a parent and, raising young kids. It's like time is like one of the biggest things that, it's so hard. And to me, I love just playing games. I just want to sit down and play. Like, I don't want to have to spend a ton of time setting up or thinking through a deck or like making sure, do I have the best card? Is this the best deck to make? I just want to sit and play. So I'm really hoping I was just messaging my cousin yesterday. Like he was like, hey, Fantasy Flight announced a new Star Wars TCG. And I was like, oh no, like this is awesome because I'm going to want it, but it's so hard. So I'm really hoping they introduce some play version. I mean, obviously there's always drafts and stuff like that, but money and time are the 2 things as an adult you're just like always in need of. So like, I'm excited to dive in, but like I have to be, like you said, like I have my limits. I have to know here's what I can do, and I hope that I can still enjoy it and play it and feel like I'm having a good time. So
well, I shall keep my fingers crossed, and let's keep talking because I'm planning to check it out as well.
Yes,
one of the
definitely.
things that I found really, really useful with Destiny was looking up other people's decks and going, right, okay, that sounds like something I want to play. I'll put that deck together rather than having to try and figure out my own combos. It's like I'm going to play that deck.
I know. Yeah, and some people just have the gift for like, oh, here I have this epic deck idea, and I'm like, that's not my gift. Like, I just want to open it and go. Anyway, well, I could talk about tabletop games for forever, but you started talking about the kind of variety of media and books that you've written in your previous answer, but you've written some really diverse offerings in the Star Wars world, like from young reader books to kind of those anthology books to comic books. Especially in the High Republic. I'm going to start talking about High Republic specifically. What's been your experience overall so far in writing all those different types of books in this kind of publishing initiative?
It's been fantastic, and it's actually until you asked the question, I hadn't really thought about the breadth of formats that I have written for the High Republic. But there's the picture flats, there's the short stories, audio, comics, middle grade novel. Obviously, it's been announced I'm now writing the first adult novel of Phase 3 as well.
Yeah.
And the second YA book. So I'm actually covering all the bases.
Yeah.
Which is amazing,
I think you get a special badge or something. Like actually,
I'm a badge, you're right. I might make one for myself.
There you go.
But it's been a brilliant experience. It's like, so it's, the story, I pick up the story thread from earlier, actually. What the way it started was with Dark Legends, because in the process of writing that book, we were having lots of conversations about, we wanted to do a story that tied in with Rise of Skywalker and Exegol. So having that conversation, and then Mike said, I really want you to do a story about the Drengir, which are going to be this, thing in the High Republic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you all the information on the High Republic on what we're doing with Phase 1, and get you to read it, absorb it, pitch me a story idea for the Drengir. Cool. Okay, so signing lots of NDAs.
Yes.
All this stuff that the original kind of 5 architects had put together for Phase 1, and pitched and wrote the Drengir story that's in the Target Special Edition.
So
and that was
good.
my first kind of thing. But it actually turned out to be, I think, the first published piece of High Republic fiction, which is crazy.
That's a badge in and of itself. Like, that's another badge, George.
And then, obviously, so Light of the Jedi came out, managed to get hold of a kind of an early reading copy of that, and I just kept reading the stuff that the team were writing because I'd been given this access, and Mike had been encouraging me just keep reading, and obviously it turned out he had a bit of a plan because when I think it was with Cav's book, The Rising Storm, he said, "Will you do the pitch flat that goes alongside it about Bury?" I was like, "Yeah, of course I will. That's write a book for kids. That's brilliant. It comes with stickers. I mean,
right."
So in phase one, I then wrote those two sticker books as well, and it was kind of towards the end of phase one. I having a conversation with Mike, and he said, "I really want to bring you in as a full writer for phase two." So, which was amazing,
Over drinks again? Was that?
After drinks. It was when we'd got together at a convention. I mean, that's when I tend to see Mike, because we intersect. We talk a lot, but we tend to intersect and have kind of good chats. It was at a convention. He brought it up, and then there was a bit of a wait while he got his ducks in a row, and they worked out what they were doing with phase two, and then he came to me and said, "Right, we'd like you to write the first middle grade of phase two." And then things just kind of ballooned from there. I mean, I was having a whale of a time, and there was the opportunity to write the Battle of Jeddah, which of course, I'd written audio. And again, this goes back to that thing I was saying earlier about like the more you've done before you come to Star Wars, the more people can see. Because I'd written Doctor Who audios, I'd written Sherlock Holmes audios, I'd written original audios. So when Mike kind of looks at this is my writing pool on my writing team on the High Republic. He's like, "Oh, George knows audio. Okay, here's a guy who could write an audiobook for us." So that's why those things tend to happen that way. I'd written comics, so I had the opportunity to write the follow up to Cav's Ty Yorick graphic novel, and then Insider as well, because we wanted to do something that tied with the Battle of Jeddah. So it seemed a logical thing to be able to kind of go, "Oh, let's just continue with those characters."
You're like an editor's dream, basically, George. You're like you can do everything. Like, that's awesome.
Well, I try, but I think what was nice about it is it meant I had, with phase two particularly there, I had kind of fingers in lots of pies, which meant I was in lots of conversations with people, and it really benefited me as a writer to be able to interact with all the other writers on the team and talk about what they were doing and how I could make what I was doing tie in more closely to them. Particularly with Battle of Jeddah, which was kind of like this linchpin moment in phase two, where I was picking up threads from what Zoraida had written, I was picking up threads from what Justina and Tessa had written, I was picking up threads from what I'd written in the middle grade. I was running concurrently with what Cav was doing in the comic, and I was running concurrently with what I was doing in the Insider stories. And then I also had to get characters to the point where they were ready for Lydia to pick up, for Cav to pick up for the YA, and for Tessa to pick up for the middle grade. So it was kind of like this weird kind of like diagram, like mind map of all these connecting bits of tissue, trying to preserve this story in the middle and still tell a complete story, but still serve the initiative as a whole. And because I was working on those other elements, I think that really helped, because I was able to kind of go, okay, right, well, I can do some of that myself. I can put that connective tissue into these stories and here and here and here, and start threads that I'm going to pick up here. So yeah, it's. I kind of feel like I've been a bit of a spider in a web, writing different things with different hands. But it's been a brilliant experience, and the rest of the team, they're so great. I'm sure you've met most of them. They're such a great bunch of people, and the original team was so welcoming as well. Like there was no question of, who are these people coming in after we've written this first phase, taken on these books. There was none of that. It was all like, guys, we've just done this. Let's help. Let's give you our experience from having done that and bring you in, and and encouraging us to contribute. and create within that space.
Yeah.
And now we're just one big happy team.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
and it sounds trite, but it's really true.
Yeah. Yeah. And little did they know that you had the first High Republic publishing author's badge already. So you're already in.
I mean, I don't know if that's 100% a fact, but I think it is, because I remember Mike saying he'd putting a teaser out to people saying, there's a High Republic story out there at the moment and no one knows.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's maybe some, you could argue maybe with Dooku Jedi Lost. Like, I mean, there's been there's been like teasers out there, but if you're talking real, the first High Republic story, yeah. I mean, we'll call it right here.
Cool. But yeah, Cav got loads of stuff in Dooku, didn't they? Like no one knew at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned Battle of Jedha. I was blown away by it. I loved it, and especially now seeing Phase 2 kind of like wrapped up, as it were. Like, no, it was very clearly that linchpin moment, and it was really cool. And like an audio drama that I've said it before. Audio books are really hard for me. They're hard for me to enjoy because my mind just wanders. I have to absorb a story very differently than when I'm reading a book. But having said that, I think it just being an audio drama with that full cast and just the production value, it was so fun. Were you able to be a part of any of those recording sessions, or were you able to listen to stuff as it was going? Like, what is your perspective as the writer, as they're like producing the finished work on that?
So not really, no. But actually, I don't. It's not a bad thing. It's like you kind of craft the story, and it's a very different experience to write. I mean, the creation of the story is the same as creating any other Star Wars story. Mm-hmm. So you're starting from what the character journeys through this story. What are the big notes that are going to change people's perspective or change the world? Because that's the purpose of any story, is to show change. So you kind of start from that point, but when you get into the meat of writing the story, it's a very different experience, because an audio drama, it's a bit like a comic. It's closer to a comic than it is to a novel, because it's a very collaborative experience. You're not writing the script for the reader. So with a novel, it's quite personal. It's just you and your editor, and your editor helps you make the best possible George Mann book that you could, right? And that's what exists at the end. It's a George Mann book that's had some advice to help you shape it. What you've got with an audio drama is a whole team behind it. So in the same way, when you write a comic, I always say that you're writing the script for the artist, not for the reader, because the only bit of your script that survives to the end is the dialogue. Yeah. And the artist is going to put that through their visual artistic filter. And audio drama takes that to the nth degree, because you're writing a script for people to perform, and you might have in your head, right, this line's really sarcastic, or this character's like, really highfalutin, thinks they're the bee's knees, and then the actor takes it and goes, "Oh, I'm gonna bring." Well, I don't even know if it's conscious, but the actor brings themselves to that part, and they'll probably do it differently from how you had it in your head. That doesn't mean it's wrong. That's the actor's job to do. So my job as a writer of audio drama is to try and give the actors good material to interpret. There's that thing of writing audio is that you can't really describe the action, because you don't want, you're trying to avoid those lines that are like, "Look over there, it's a guy with a shield. Oh no, he's pulling a gun." You want to try and avoid those, because that just sounds a bit hokey. So you're trying to find a naturalistic way to through dialogue to bring in, and sound effects that you're suggesting as well, to bring in that environment and that world. But yeah, really, I mean, and it's an interesting experience for me, because obviously what happens then is I put those scripts in. I got feedback from the usual route, so my editor Tom, the guys at Lucasfilm, but also from the audio drama department, who come back with like, "We're not sure this scene's going to scan quite right. Can you kind of like build it out a little bit more to make it clear what's going on in the audio?" So you kind of do a bit of work to help that, to help then bring it to life, and then it goes off, and you kind of you don't know how it's going to come back. And then it's quite astounding actually to because you can come to it more as a fan, because I love experiencing the other Star Wars projects as a fan, and that's true of like the other High Republic novels. I kind of know what's going to happen because we've talked it through at great length and worked out those story beats. But actually, I love being able to pick up those books and go, how do they actually execute it? Because there's a difference between knowing that this character is going to do X thing and then seeing it happen in a book. And it's the same with getting your own story back in audio, because you don't know how it's going to be performed. You go, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that character to sound like that, but I like it. And how did they bring these characters to life? So it makes it a special experience to come to it later, and hear it brought to life.
I bet that's super interesting, and like something that I don't think just the regular consumer like would even think about. So that's a really cool perspective, and the way that you described writing comics, like you're writing it for the artist, and writing audio drama, you're writing it for the act. That's really interesting, and that's a really cool just distinction that I don't think a lot of people think about. So that's and it's really cool that you get to experience it like the end user too sometimes. So
yeah, no, I mean that's it never gets old. Especially with comics, it never gets old when you send off your script and you get the pages back.
I can imagine.
It's just like, whoa.
Yes.
The artists we get to work with are really high caliber. They're great artists, and you get these pages back, and you just think, they've taken an idea I had and they've times it by 10. They've amped it up, or they've done something really cool and interesting with it. And what I love particularly when you get to do a longer run with an artist and you get to know each other a bit more, you can start writing to their strengths as well. It's like, an artist will I did a Dark Souls comic book a few years back, and I got to a point of trust with the artist where I could just kind of go, right, there's a big fight sequence now. Here's a list of 5 things that have to happen by the end of the fight. Go for
it. Yeah.
And it's really special because you get it back, and I knew that what he wanted was to be off the leash to be able to do that. And when you're working on an IP, a branded product, you have to be quite strict and tight about this is how the story's going to unfold, because that's the story that's been approved. So it's this is the story we've got to tell, and we've got to tell it this way. So most of what you're doing is really on this page, these things have to happen, and they have to happen pretty much in this way. But then you get these moments where, and it happens a lot with action sequences as well. It happens with Star Wars, with big fight sequences as well, where you can go do some cool stuff with lightsabers. And it's great. It's great because the artist, you can tell when you get it back how much fun the artist had. And if the artist had fun and you're having fun looking at it, it means that the reader's going to have fun.
Definitely. And I want to give a special shout out to Eduardo Mayo, who had worked on The Nameless Terror with you. Oh, blown away by his work. Amazing. And I love it so much. I'm super thrilled with the reception that those comics have had so far. They were a lot of fun to write, and the team, all of the team, from pencils, inks, colors, they've done an amazing job. Yeah, the High Republic Adventures has been one of my favorite just things that exists in the High Republic in general, and that this miniseries has been. I was looking forward to it, but I wasn't expecting to be as entertained, and it's amazing. I love it.
I love writing Pathfinders. That's the truth of it.
Yeah,
those kind of that idea of kind of teams out on there on the frontier having these adventures, or getting stranded or getting into difficult spots really appeals to me.
Definitely.
So, yeah, really
cool. So I have a 2-part question for you. Who has been your favorite Star Wars character that you have written? And then who is your dream character in the IP that you would like to write?
Interesting question. And there's lots, and it probably changes from week to week, if I'm honest. But I think my favorite character to write has been Salandra Show, I think. And that's not just because she's kind of one of my original characters, but it's because I feel like she really she's got quite a poignant, powerful stance. That it's not just the shield; it's what the shield symbolizes for Salandra. You know, that idea of like, I'd rather be the shield than the sword. Our job is to defend people, and she takes that to the nth degree. And I think it's interesting, and it's a slightly different approach from other Jedi I've written before. You know, obviously, all Jedi are there to protect people. That's their main mission. It's just Salandra takes that further. She kind of tries to embody that. It's been a real joy to come back to her. I mean, I can't really say much about it, but to come back to her in the YA anthology that's coming out soon, and tell another story for her and Rupa, which is called Shield of the Jedi.
Yes.
I can't really give anything away about what happens in that story, but yeah, I think, you know, as soon as she came from concept art that the guys had done, of a like Republic citizen, and she had what looked like a hat on the back. It was, you know, kind of on her shoulders was this thing, and you know, having heard later, the artist definitely thought it was probably a hat, but I looked at it and kind of went, that could be a shield, and just kind of tried to roll with that idea. And as soon as I kind of wrote her in Quest for the Hidden City, I was like, she has to be in Battle of Jeddah. I really, really want to get Salandra in Battle of Jeddah, and she's a character I just want to keep coming back to because I can see the opportunity to tell more stories with her.
Sure.
So that's part one, and that is in no way to diminish all the other characters I've been lucky enough to write, because, you know, in the Myths and Fables books, to be able to touch on like Obi-Wan and Darth Maul and Grievous, you know, it's a huge kind of honor to be able to touch those characters, and also the other High Republic characters that the team have written. You know, Burryaga, you know, he's
who doesn't love him? Who doesn't love him?
He's a legend.
Yes.
In terms of characters I'd still like to write, I would love to get my hands on Sabine Wren.
Nice. Okay.
I love Rebels. You know, I mean, yes. I love all of Star Wars. Something about Rebels, and you know, we were kind of talking about this before, that idea of like you encounter different projects, films, TV shows at different times in your life, and they have an impression on you. And Rebels, particularly for me, it's a moment between me and my eldest where we were really enjoying Star Wars together. So aside from the fact I love the show and the premise of the show, I love the experience of watching the show. So it made it very special to me. And I'm within that show, I think Sabine's my favourite character. I just think she's cool. So I can't wait to see how she turns out in live action in Ahsoka.
Yes. Sounds like you and Michael need to have another drink and talk some Sabine Sabine books.
I've got plenty of other High Republic stuff on at the moment. We've announced 2 novels.
Yes, so that's true. Yes,
that's going to keep me busy.
Your
for
plate's
a while.
Pretty busy. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. But one day.
There you go.
Definitely.
There you go. We'll let you be inspired by the Ahsoka series, and then take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait.
That's awesome. So on my show, almost every single episode, I talk through what I call it my last, current, next. So it's the last book I read, what I'm currently reading, and what I'm planning on reading next. So I ask this of all my guests as well. So what is your last, current, next, George?
Wow. So the last book I read was an interesting non-fiction book called The Road. And I'm trying to remember the author's name, Christopher Handley, I think, and it's about Roman roads in Britain. So it's looking at, but it's not as dry as that sounds. He takes one road that's been mostly forgotten, and he tells the story of this road from Roman times through to how it is these days, which is like part of it's tarmacked. Part of it is a section of kind of bridle path where horses can walk. Part of it's completely overgrown. He talks about the history of roads and what they did for Britain. So it's a fascinating journey through time, through the history of Britain, as told by this one section of road. So that was a great read. Currently, I'm reading a book called Blood and Bone by Ian Cameron Esselmont, which is a big, I call them big fat fantasies. It's like a 1,000-page fantasy book from the Malazan series. So Malazan was created by Ian Cameron Esselmont and Stephen Erickson, his friend, as an RPG setting years and years and years ago for their own private use. And then Stephen Erickson wrote this epic 10-book series called The Malazan Book of the Fallen. And it's, in my eyes, the best fantasy ever written. Absolutely, like, it's superb. It's very dense, but it's superb. And Esselmont has now written a whole series of other books set in the same world, but he's doing his own thing with his own characters. And that's one of those. So I'm thoroughly enjoying that, but it's a long read. Chipping away at that on my Kindle. My next book is actually sat next to me because it's just arrived today, and it's the new James Bond. So we had
the special one for the
coronation.
Is that for the coronation? Yeah.
Yeah,
I heard about that.
So obviously on His Majesty's Secret Service, and it's written by Charlie Higson, who's a great writer and actor over here. So I'm looking forward to. I love the James Bond novels and the films, so it's going to be a kind of a palate cleanser, that one. It's quite short, but that's next on my list.
Nice. I heard about that, and I was like, I've never read any James Bond novels, but I was like, I'm a British culture fan. And so obviously the coronation just happened. When I heard that was going on, I was like, I got to read that. That sounds really fun. So
yeah. So, I mean, I don't really know anything about it other than it was like new Bond, Charlie Higson, buy it.
Got it.
So I'm looking forward to that. And then lots of Star Wars to read as well. You know, I'm looking forward to all the other authors turning in their manuscripts for the next tranche of books, so I can
How exciting. Yes.
Sit and read those. Can't wait.
So exciting. Well, congrats on the new king. I know all eyes were on you guys recently. So my kids, it was so funny because my wife and I are huge, obviously fans of The Crown, and we're just fascinated by, the monarchy. And so we had it on, on YouTube on our Saturday morning, and really? They were so confused. They're like, "What is this?" I'm like, "This is history. We will watch this." Like,
it is. It's strange, isn't it? So I'm not a huge monarchist. Nor am I an outright Republican or anything like that. I'm kind of like halfway house, I think.
Sure.
But so I didn't watch the whole kind of like 7 hours or whatever it was. But I did watch the bit where he was actually crowned.
Yeah.
And she was crowned queen, and
yes.
I kind of watching it thinking this must seem entirely bonkers to the rest of the world. It's like strange cultish behavior, like where they took him behind 4 screens and took his shirt off and anointed him with magical oil. And I'm just like, and then he puts on one glove and he has to hold a sword, and then they take the sword off him and they exchange some coins, and then they give him the sword back. And it's like, this is crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. I kind of love it. I love the.
I do too. I love just exactly the oddity of it, and just it's history. Like, it's history happening. It's so interesting to me. And my kids are like, "What? Why did he put on a glove? And what is going on?" I was like, "Well, that he doesn't get to keep those things." Like, just trying to explain it to a 8-year-old, it's just like it makes it seem more absurd than it actually.
But I mean, it's a proper spectacle. So I kind of love that side of it, but I also we're in a cost of living crisis where the price of food's going sky high. Price of fuel is super high, so all our energy bills are through the roof. And I kind of then look at that and kind of go, they've spent so much money on that.
Yeah.
And surely they could have still done the important bit and saved some of that money and used it to help people who need it. Yeah. So that's why I'm kind of like in two minds about the whole kind of the spectacle of it. In some respects it's great, and in other respects it's like maybe it wasn't the message we want to send the world right now when we people living in poverty.
I agree with that. And I'm we don't have to get into it too much, but like William and Kate are like my wife and I's age, and like we're raising kids in the same age as them. So, part of me is like, okay, if William's going to be the one to end the monarchy, maybe it'll be his son. Does the monarchy need to exist? Like, having all these questions, and obviously I have a very different perspective as an American, but I can imagine that tension feels a little bit different as a
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm not on. I don't think they should be abolished, but I also think we need to control that spending. And,
Yeah, for sure.
So it's we're getting into politics.
We can do a separate episode about what our thoughts on the British monarchy.
So what we need is a tabletop game about the British monarchy using lightsabers.
You know what? Quick, really funny story is I had pre-ordered a Star Wars book from a UK retailer. I forgot what it was at the time. Oh no. My kids and I are big Tom Fletcher fans, so he's of McFly, and he writes all those kids' books. So he writes like The Dinosaur That Pooped. I bought one of his books because they don't sell them in the US when they first come out over there. So I buy them from a UK retailer. And so I was like, oh, sweet. The new book finally came. I open it up, and it's literally like, it's a hardcover. It's like a coffee table book about the Queen. Like that's what they sent me. Yeah. And so my son was like, what is this? And I was like, I didn't order this. This is the wrong book, but I don't hate it. So, it was really funny. It was so
that's
funny.
Hilarious.
Anyway, I guess it was just really on brand for this UK retailer to just. Well, George, as we wrap up, can you is there any other cons or signings that can might be on the docket for you this year that people can catch you at?
Yeah. So the only one I kind of know 100% for sure right now is San Diego Comic-Con.
Okay.
So I'm coming out for San Diego. I think we're going to be doing some signings, both kind of with the Dark Horse guys and the team for the comic, and with hopefully with Lucasfilm some books. So kind of watch social media, and we'll announce more when we know it's definite. But I will certainly be there.
That's awesome. Well, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on and just chatting. And I feel like we could just keep going talking about tabletop games.
I know. Well,
I appreciate it. Yeah, definitely. Definitely when you have some other stuff coming out, maybe later in the year, we'll definitely get something else
coming out at the start of phase 3 that might be a bit later in the year.
Yep. We'll definitely have you back and talk about all those things. So thank you again so much.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Casey, wasn't George a blast to talk to? I 100% agree. I cannot wait until the day when we can sit and play a tabletop game together and discuss Star Wars books. I'm excited to have him on the show again in the future when his new books come out in the High Republic. Me too, bud. I want to say thank you once again to my guest, George Mann, for joining me today. I hope you can go check out all of the books that he's currently been publishing in the Star Wars universe. He has written some really cool stuff. The Battle of Jeddah is one of them, the audio drama, which is, like he said, the linchpin of Phase 2. Really looking forward to what he has in store for us in the future, so I definitely look forward to having him on again in the future. That's it for today's episode. Thanks again for joining me. Take us out, Casey. Thank you so much for listening. For more of my content, visit my website at thisdadreads.com for full book reviews, interviews, and articles. Follow me on socials at thisdadreads on Twitter and Instagram. This Dad Reads, the podcast, is produced by Aravis Industries and me. Special thanks to my editor, Jeremy Tuttle, and to Coma-Media for the use of their song Bounce. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and leave me a 5-star review. It really helps. Catch you next time.